Hello and welcome to Gardening in 58 North, and in this video I'm going to be planting up my ginger tubers here and also my turmeric tubers. So the ginger tubers, I actually grew this last year from a piece of ginger which was about this size. This is the original tuber which is kind of shriveled up. Might be dead, but I'm still going to plant it just in case, see if it will grow. And basically it increased in size about 6 times, and this is what I was left with. A nice decent sized piece of ginger. This has been sitting dry out of the pot for about a month now, so it needs to be potted on. It needs to be planted up. With ginger and turmeric, that needs a very long growing season, so ideally I probably would have done this in January, February. But with moving house and with the coronavirus, I've been delayed a little bit, so I'm planting it now, kind of early April time. And I'm also going to be growing this turmeric. The turmeric my parents grew from a tuber about this size last year, and it's produced this kind of size of tuber. So basically, I'm not sure which was the original tuber, but it grew this kind of large section here when it had a lot of leaves, and then it grew one tuber and another tuber down like that. So I'm going to be planting both of these. This one snapped off as it was quite delicately attached over there. So ginger and turmeric like quite a lot of moisture, but they can also be quite liable to rotting if it's too wet. So I also need a free draining compost. So I've made a mix here which is quite a lot of perlite to keep it nice and loose and stop it getting too waterlogged, too saturated. So any excess water should drain out of this compost quite nicely. The perlite, which is the white little bits in here, that will allow more air into the compost, let the water drain a little bit more freely, and to stop it from getting too soggy and too wet. So the main base of this compost is quite a rich multi-purpose compost. It's going to be high in feed, give them a good head start. With turmeric and ginger, they do like quite a lot of feed, and early on the nitrogen is quite good to get their leaves nice and big, get a good sized plant above ground. But then around midsummer, when they've got to a decent size, you want to switch to a low nitrogen feed, because you don't want to encourage lots of leaves for the whole year. You want the leaves to get big to begin with, get the plant to a nice size, so then it has the leaves and the size of the plant to then absorb as much sun as possible and produce the tubers that you want. So from midsummer I then switch to a tomato feed, which is high in potassium and phosphorus, which will help it concentrate instead of growing leaves into growing a lot more tubers. So this is a nice rich compost which should give it a good head start. I've also added a small amount of loamy sand from my parents' garden, and that's just because I find if you have peat or coir based compost, once they become completely dry, they don't re-moisten very easily. So you put your water in, the water drains straight through, or it runs off the surface. But I find if you add a small amount of loam into the mix, it absorbs the moisture much more readily. So I've just put a small amount of that in as well. So I'll start potting these up. I've got quite a large pot here for the ginger. Ginger, I've got quite a large tuber, so it needs a decent sized pot. I'm just going to plant them all in this one for now. This won't be the permanent pot, I don't think, because I think eventually I will be putting them into the ground or into a much larger pot, because I'm hoping to get some decent growth from them this year. Last year I grew my ginger on my windowsill, and it grew okay, but it wasn't the hottest environment and it wasn't the sunniest, so it didn't get huge. And with the turmeric, my parents grew it, but it was just in standard garden soil in the polytunnel. It grew into a very small plant. It was a small tuber to begin with, and so it didn't really get to a huge size. But hopefully this year we can get a bit more of a crop out of it. It was actually so small, as you can see from here with the turmeric, that you couldn't really harvest it, because if you harvested it then there'd be nothing to plant for next year. So with the ginger, I could, if I wanted to split this up, you could split it up into sections about 1 inch or so across, 2 or 3 centimeters, and that would be fine. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to plant it as a whole chunk, see what it grows like, because last year I saw what it grew like as a small tuber. What happened is it grew one shoot, and then it would grow another one and another one and slowly spread. So I'm going to put in just the whole piece here. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm expecting there to be several shoots to come up at once instead of just the one. But if you were to be growing this for commercial reasons or at home, you'd probably break them up into pieces a bit bigger than this and plant them, and then you'd get lots of plants and you'd probably get a slightly better harvest. But I'm just curious this year as to how it will grow. So I'm just going to nestle it in there with this one just to the side. It doesn't matter too much which is up and down, but you can see the roots are coming out the bottom of there. So I'm going to put that as the down facing side. It's not the end of the world if I put it upside down, but it is best to put it the right way around. And then I'm just going to put a sprinkling of soil. The ginger tubers don't like to be too deep, so I'm not going to cover them more than 1 inch. They basically just want to be slightly under the surface, and as they grow, the tubers actually quite often push above the surface. So they're probably just about an inch at the most, probably only about half an inch to be honest, and that should be fine. So I'll give these a good watering. And then with the turmeric, I'm going to be using a smaller pot because they're much smaller tubers. Again, the same compost mix, they like quite a similar compost. I'm going to plant the tubers slightly deeper with the turmeric, but not much. And the turmeric tubers, as this was the top before, I'm going to plant it in like this. The turmeric tubers are not like the ginger where it creeps along the surface of the soil. These tend to grow the tubers a little bit further underneath the soil, and they often face down, not always though. And this one was broken off and it was facing that way around, so I'm just going to put it in the same orientation as it came from the original one. And I'm just going to plant these slightly deeper, but not much, probably only about an inch or two underground. So that's the ginger and the turmeric now planted up. What I'll do now is give these a really good soak, put them in a really nice warm environment, probably somewhere in the polytunnel. I've got a mini greenhouse within the polytunnel for extra heat. I want to keep these really nice and warm. They are tropical plants after all, so they want a really nice warm environment, quite a humid environment as well. I'll give them a good soak to begin with, and then I won't water them again unless they really dry out a lot. The ginger seems to grow quite well if you give it a good soak and then let it dry out a little bit. If you keep it wet and it's not growing, it's going to start rotting and it's not going to like it. And the turmeric should be quite similar with the kind of soil conditions that it needs. So I put these in a nice warm position. As I said before in the video, it's a very long growing season for ginger and turmeric, so these will be finished, ready to harvest kind of December time, right at the end of the season. Ideally you want to give them almost a year of growing, so 9 or 10 months is about what you need for them. They're a tropical plant. They have a very long growing season where they come from naturally, so you want to give them a long growing season as possible, especially if you're growing them out of the tropics where your climate isn't ideal for them. So I'll be having them in the polytunnel for as long as possible, possibly my conservatory. I'll just see if I've got space. I might also plant some of these in the soil in the polytunnel. We'll just see how it is. If the soil is quite cold, then I'll keep them in the pots and just put them in a larger pot. But I'll give you guys an update in probably about 2 months time. They're quite slow to get going. I found the ginger last year took about a month to get sprouted. Looking online, the turmeric might even take slightly longer. So it'll probably be about a month or two until I get an update. I'll keep them as warm as possible, try and get them into growth as quickly as possible, but I'm expecting it to be a bit of a slow process.